Welcome to lesson 27 of Hunger and Thirst for Righteousness. This is God's heart verse law, and I'm so happy to be here today to do this with you. It's been a little while. Of course, if you're watching this series, you won't be able to tell the space difference between lessons being recorded, but it's been a little bit since I recorded the last one, so I'm looking forward to getting into this lesson, God's heart verse law. I think it's a really great topic for every believer to come to understand the difference between the law of God in the heart of God. There is a difference. There's a difference between the law of God and the Spirit of God. There is a difference. There's a difference. And so we'll get into this today just to see the character of God and understand, his perspective, his difference, how he behaves differently. If I can give us something short of just insight about these two things before we even get into the lesson. We'll understand that God's law is a law that is set in stone from the beginning of time. It's an eternal law, which means that these laws have been in place since there's been anything in existence, which is God. Since God has existed, the laws existed. He is life. Everything that is contrary to life is signified in that law. That's not him, that they're not his ways, that he would never produce, And so we understand that law has existed since the beginning of time. The beginning of time. And so we understand that when we are receiving rewards and consequences from his law, they're not personal rewards or personal consequences from the heart of God. That's his law. That no one can change, that he won't change, that he is quite literally going to stay. He says that he will not change his mind on his word. He's not going to change it. But that's why he sends us messengers to help us do right by it, to understand these laws they're eternal, that have always been. And so if I can give us something small before we get into this lesson about understanding the difference between this law of God that has been the rules since the beginning. But then we have the heart of God. And if I can give us even more insight about that, I would think about like this, like every country has its law system, right? But every law is upheld by a judge. So you understand that God has a law, but he's also going to be a judge. And every judge judges off that law differently, but you have to know his heart to know how he judges off of that law. You got to know it. And so let's get into it. And so it says this, Acts 13:22. After he had removed him, he raised up David to be their king, concerning whom he also testified and said, I have found David, the son of Jesse, a man after my heart who will do all my will. Now, why are we reading this? Because this story is about David, who attained the testimony of being a man after God's heart. Once again, why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up to understand that we're going to see a lot of the characteristics of the heart of God in David, because that's what he was seeking. That's what he was trying to be like. That's what he was chasing in his life, was the heart of God. And so we're going to see a lot of the characteristics of the heart of God in David, especially in this story, which is a very good story to see the heart of God. And so this story will actually range about 6 chapters. I pulled some scriptures to give us a good paraphrase, a good synopsis of what happened. I would implore you to go and read this a little bit more. I believe it goes from 2 Samuel 13 to 2 Samuel 18. And so I'll go ahead and read. We have got about 20 slides, so bear with me. Hopefully you got your Bible out. Hopefully you're ready to dive into this word with me. And so it says this, Then Absalom, her brother, said to her, Has Amnon your brother been with you? But now keep silent, my sister. He is your brother. Do not take this matter to heart. So Tamar remained and was desolate in her brother Absalom's house. Now when King David heard of all these matters, he was very angry, but Absalom did not speak to Amnon either good or bad. For Absalom hated Amnon because he had violated his sister. So the story, what's going on right now, is we have to understand that this is after Amnon has raped his sister. Amnon has raped his sister. Absalom, his brother, knows about it. And David, his father, now knows about it. Okay? And so we'll keep going, but we also have this distinction with Absalom, who we see that did not speak to Amnon either good or bad. Because, why? Because he hated him. And I love this too, because you're going to learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot as we read this. I also want you to take notice how we have King David, who was very angry. He said he was very angry, right? But Absalom did not speak either good or bad, for Absalom hated Amnon because he violated his sister. David did not hate. It says a murderer hates. David was not a murderer. It says clearly in this word that he had one fumble, and it was the coveting of his neighbor's possession, but he was not a murderer, a hateful person at heart. That's not who he was. He was someone after God's own heart. So even though his son had raped his daughter, he still didn't hate him. Actually, what I come to understand in this story, we have the one who hated, that would not speak good or bad, but the one with love was angry. And that changed my perspective a little bit about emotion. It helped me understand that, you know what? If someone actually hates you, they'd say nothing. They would feel nothing. They would be cold-hearted about what you do in your life. They don't care. But David became angry about this. But I believe that's because he cared. He's going to show how much he cares throughout the story. Absalom commanded his servants, saying, "See now, when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon, then put him to death. Do not fear. Have not I myself commanded you? Be courageous and be valiant. The servants of Absalom did to Amnon just as Absalom had commanded. Then all the king's sons arose, and each mounted his mule and fled." Okay. So he's given the order for them to kill his brother, which we just showed in the last slide how he showed his murderous heart from the beginning, because he hated him and would not speak to him good or bad. And what did he end up doing later? The physical manifestation of the spiritual murder in his heart comes out as he tries to kill his brother later. Moreover, Absalom would say, so now we're in chapter 15, so we went ahead a little bit. And so let's see where we are now. Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land, then every man who has any suit or cause will come to me, and I will give him justice. And when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he will put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him." In this manner, Absalom dealt with all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole away the hearts of the men of Israel. Okay, so here we are. We have Absalom who stood at the gates, and he was basically being a representative of the king, and they would come to the king for judgment. When he came for judgment, basically he would show this mercy and grace towards them that turned the hearts of the people around him to them. I think this is very an interesting thing that goes on, and this is a big story, so we're going to read a whole lot. This is just a small part of the story, but I think this is a very interesting thing that goes on, because we know Absalom so far to be a murderer, right? But he's extending this graciousness, but it's all in a facade, and we're going to see in the reason why he's doing this, but it's not in good intent. And it's also why we can't look at the moment. We have to look at the reality. What's the whole reality? It says the sum of God's word is truth. Well, the truth is the sum of our ways are truth. The sum of our word is truth. The sum of our life is truth. What's the truth about this person, right? So then it says, "Now it came about at the end of the 40 years that Absalom said to the king, 'Please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I was living at Geshur in Aram, saying, if the Lord shall indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord.' The king said to him, 'Go in peace.' So he arose and went in Hebron." So here we are, who is David, who gives no hindrance to serving the Lord. He says, go serve the Lord, right? But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes. So he sent him and said, go serve the Lord. But once again, we're seeing the reality of Absalom's heart. He is a murderer. He hated his brother. He killed his brother. And although he was being nice for a moment, this is the heart of Absalom. He is a murderer. And there is no one who is a murderer who is genuinely serving the Lord. No one who hates is genuinely serving the Lord. They're not. So then it says, it's funny because it literally says in the Bible, it says all those who hate you, talking about to the Lord, will pretend obedience. And I think that's powerful, because we also, if we love him, we love people. But I can also see clearly how if we hate him, we pretend obedience and loving people, right? We pretend it. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. Then 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, who were invited and went innocently, and they did not know anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city Gilo, while he was offering the sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, the people increased continually with Absalom. So Absalom is literally... it's a conspiracy. It's an overthrow. He's literally trying to overthrow his father off the throne. That's what he's trying to do. He's been nice to all these people, got all these people on his side, who came to the king for judgment, but he sent them mercy and grace and his love, right? So he's got all these people on his side. All these people, he's recruiting people on his side. And notice that it says these people who went innocently, they were ignorant. They had no idea what was going on. Absalom knew what he was doing, but the people he was using had no idea what were going on. So then it says, then the messenger came to David saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us will escape from Absalom. For in haste, or he will overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. Then the king's servant said to the king, behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses. So the king went out and all his household with him, but the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. Now, once again, David knows about his son. He says, no, we got to get away from here. Absalom, my son Absalom is a murderer. He's a murderer. But it's funny because when I read this, I think about Jesus, and he says that no one is worthy of being his if they don't hate their mother, hate their brother, hate their mother, hate their father, hate their brother, hate their sister, hate their spouse, hate even their child in comparison to him. Why is that? Because you be impartial. Most of us don't want to be honest about the murderous ways of our family. This is his own son, and he has to be honest with himself. And he says, no, my son does not have love in his heart. We got to leave. We need to flee this area. We need to flee this area. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give your advice. What shall we do? Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house. And all Israel will hear that you have made yourself odious to your father. The hands of all who are with you will also be strengthened. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. So, Absalom is seeking counsel about what to do from his father's own counselor. What to do is he's trying to overthrow this his father, right? So his father his counselor gives him the counsel that he should sleep with his wives. If you don't know, concubine in this word of God, seek deeply about it, seek everywhere you can, and you'll understand it is a wife. It is a wife with less authority in the household. So he had 10 of them that he left behind. Absalom went and slept with them, okay? Furthermore, Ahithophel said to Absalom, please let me choose 12,000 men that I may arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and exhausted and terrify him so that all the people who are with him will flee. Then I will strike down the king alone, and I will bring back all the people to you. The return of everyone depends on the man you seek. Then all the people will be at peace. So the plan pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. Okay, so the counselor says, let me get 12,000 men. I'll go pursue David. I'll take him down. So here we are. We're going to skip a little bit ahead to the next chapter in 18, 1-2. It says, then David numbered the people who were with him and set over them commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. David sent the people out 1/3 under the command of Joab, 1/3 under the command of Abishai and the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the command of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said to the people, I myself will surely go out with you also. So David's preparing, right? But the people say, you shall not go out, for if we indeed flee, they will not care about us. Even if half of us die, they will not care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us. Therefore now it's better that you be ready to help us from the city. Then the king said to them, whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by hundreds and thousands. The king charged Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. And all the people heard when the king charged the commanders concerning Absalom. And so we're going to keep going this story, but this is the first part where we're going to see the difference between the law of God and God's heart. We know very well quickly, we know very well clearly that Absalom has transgressed the law of God in many ways. In many ways. And come against the king, he's what do you call it? When it comes against the king, he's transgressed the law of God. In his murderous ways, he's transgressed the law of God. In his lying and false witnessing, he's transgressed the law of God. He's up there in transgressors right now, right? But look at this. David knows the law of God. But what does he say about his own son? It says, deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. Deal gently. And we'll get into this more and more in a second. But I really want us to meditate on this. Really meditate on this. Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. This young man Absalom that's killed his own brother. This young man Absalom that's tried to overthrow his own father's kingdom. But look at the mercy and gentleness of David's heart. This is not a man that's hungry for revenge. This is a just man that understands that he must be dealt with. But is he hungry for blood? Is he hungry for the torment of his own son? Is he hungry for the death of it? He's not hungry for it. In the same way, that's how our God is with us. Is that we may do wrong, and he knows we're wrong. We know we're wrong. And does he have to deal with us? He does have to deal with us. He says God would not be mocked. But we have to understand that when we are his son, we're his son. We're his son. It says in his word that he will not put on us more than we can bear. We are his son. Sons and daughters, right? In the same way David has his heart for his own son, is the same way that God has a heart for us. Is that he knows that he must command his angels to deal with the things he's told them to deal with, to give the punishments that he's told to give, the consequences for the disobedience. He knows that. He knows it. But is he letting the angels kill you? He's not letting we're still standing here, and a lot of us are very deep, have been very deep in sins in our lives. Are we still alive? We're still here. And so we'll keep going in this story, but this is one of the major points that we'll talk about in a second, even with the parable of Jesus, of the heart of God, of how this child has done so much wrong, has been so evil, has even tried to take over his own father's kingdom. But David did not have a heart that wanted the death of his son. He didn't want that. That's the same thing with God. It literally says that God does not delight in the death of any of his. He's not delighting in punishing and consequencing and even if he has to blot someone's name out of the book of life, does he delight in it? No, it's not his joy to do such a thing. He loves us. Let's keep it going. So here we are. Now Absalom happened to meet the servants of David, for Absalom was riding on his mule, and the mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head caught fast in the oak, so he was left hanging between heaven and earth, while the mule that was under him kept going. When a certain man saw it, he told Joab and said, behold, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak. Then Joab said to the man who had told him, now behold, you saw him. Why then did you not strike him there to the ground, and I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt? The man said to Joab, even if I should receive 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not put out my hand against the king's son. For in our hearing the king charged you in Abishai and Attai, saying, protect for me the young man Absalom. Otherwise, if I had dealt treacherously against his life, and there is nothing hidden from the king, then you yourself would have stood aloof. Then Joab said, I will not waste time here with you. So he took 3 spears in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was yet alive in the midst of the oak. And 10 young men who carried Joab's armor gathered around and struck Absalom and killed him. Then Joab blew the trumpet, and the people arrived from pursuing Israel, for Joab restrained the people. They took Absalom and cast him into a deep pit in the forest, and erected over him a very great heap of stones. And all Israel fled, each to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up for himself a pillar, which is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to preserve my name. So he named the pillar after his own name, and it is called Absalom's monument to this day. Skipping down a little bit. Now David was sitting between the 2 gates, and the watchman went up to the roof of the gate by the wall and raised his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was running by himself. The watchman called and told the king, and the king said, if he is by himself, there is good news in his mouth. And he came nearer and nearer. Then the watchman saw another man running, and the watchman called to the gatekeeper and said, Behold, another man running by himself. And the king said, This one also was bringing good news. The watchman said, I think the running of the first one is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok. And the king said, This is a good man and comes with good news. Ahimaaz called and said to the king, All is well. And he prostrated himself before the king with his face to the ground. And he said, Blessed the Lord your God, who has delivered up the men who lifted their hands against my lord the king. The king said, Is it well with the young man Absalom? And Ahimaaz answered, Then when Joab sent the king's servant and your servant, I saw a great tumult, and I did not know what it was. Then the king says, Turn aside and stand here. So he turned aside and stood still. Behold, the Cushite arrived, and the Cushite said, Let my lord the king receive good news, for the Lord has freed you this day from the hand of all those who rose up against you. Then the king said to the Cushite, Is it well with the young man Absalom? And the Cushite answered, Let the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up against you for evil be as that young man. Then the king was deeply moved and went up to the chamber over the gate and wept. And thus he said as he walked, O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, would I had died instead of you. O Absalom, my son, my son. And so I'm going to go back one slide again because I want us to notice something that, these people are having this perspective that, that Absalom, he came against you, all these people came against you and we won. We slayed them. They're nothing. You're free from this trial and tribulation in your life. There's no one persecuting you anymore, all these things. And they think that David's going to be happy. They think that David's going to be happy about what has come upon Absalom. What's come upon him? They think he's going to be happy. What we don't understand is that David displays the heart of God that he was after. Is that amongst all these things, he never even asked, did you win the battle? He never asked any of those things. All he wanted to know was, how is it with the young man Absalom, my son? My son. And notice, although this quote unquote victory has been had of his kingdom, he doesn't feel like this is a victory. He's weeping. Why? Because of the death of his son. But notice this also. This is something I also noticed that he says. He said, oh, that I wish it would have been me rather than you. That I would have died in your place. And when I read that, all I can hear and think about is Jesus Christ. It's how the Lord has never delighted in the death of us. He's never delighted in it. It doesn't matter how bad you think you are, how bad you think someone else is. He has never delighted in it. Never. 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 And so we'll read a couple scriptures from the New Testament here with Jesus and to wrap this up, and then we'll be done for the day. And so once again, we already read this before. I'll give it to you again just to reiterate it, just how David attained the testimony from the Lord that he was after God's heart. Now, we're going to read some things in Jesus' teachings that are going to help us see how he was of God's heart, right? And this heart versus law situation. So at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples became hungry and began to pick the heads of grain and eat. But when the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, Look, your disciples do what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. But he said to them, Have you not read what David did when he became hungry? He and his companions, how he entered the house of God, and they ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those with him, but for the priests alone? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple break the Sabbath and are innocent? So basically, I love this one because, once again, these people are coming with this very lawful mindset. And he's trying to show you the difference between law and heart. Law and heart. Law and heart. Is that, yes, I understand that he's saying the law says this, but he's trying to say, he uses David as an example, which I believe is because he was a man after God's own heart. But he uses David as an example. He says, well, don't you know what David did? But I love this, too, him using David as an example, because David attained the testimony. David attained the testimony from the Lord, and it's funny because it's almost like well, not even almost, a less spiritually appraised Jesus when it comes to David, because he's attained the testimony that the Lord literally said, he followed me fully, except in the case with Uriah the Hittite. That's the only thing That is the only thing that he has against David. So when Jesus is quoting and saying what David did, it's powerful because he's literally saying that I had no problem with him when he did these things. But he's showing him the heart of God. The heart of God, the difference, the difference between law and the heart of God. And I'm not going to go too deep into the parable of the situation, what everything means. I just want to talk about the difference, how people who are law. And Jesus is like, but look at God's heart. Matthew 11:29 says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Why do I love bringing this up right now? Because we're talking about a man that's after God's own heart. The Lord is saying, this is his heart. I am gentle and humble in heart. David slayed Goliath, and he slayed tens of thousands in war. But you see clearly that his heart was actually gentle. He did not want. He literally wanted his son to be dealt with gently. Gently, he wanted his son to be dealt with. Did he have to be dealt with? Yes, he did have to be dealt with. But did he want him dealt with in a manner that was, what do I say, is over the top or excruciating or just rubbing in the pain in the situation? No, he didn't want his son tormented. He's gentle. And I love it because in this way, we see an example of how we can exemplify the gentle heart of God in our lives. The gentle heart of God. Okay, we'll read this last parable here, and then we will be done for the day, okay? And so when he said, this is Jesus, a man had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the estate that falls to me. So he divided his wealth between them, and not many days later, the younger son gathered everything together and went on a journey into a distant country, and there he squandered his estate with loose living. Now, when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country, and he began to be impoverished. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, and he sent him into his field to feed swine. And he would have gladly filled his stomach with the pies that the swine were eating, and no one was giving anything to him. But when he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough bread? But I am dying here with hunger. I will get up and go to my father and will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men. So he got up and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced and kissed him. Before I even go to this last slide, Jesus literally says, I don't desire sacrifice, I desire compassion. The heart of God we're seeing in this parable is that he sees his son and he has compassion. David is in contemplation about his son and he's showing compassion. Not, oh, I want to rub it in about you're going this dark way, you're doing wrong, you didn't listen to me. That's not who God is. Oh, I can't wait till he gets back so I can punish him. That's not who God is. No, he saw him and felt compassion for him and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his slaves, quickly bring out the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and sandals on his feet. And bring the fattened calf, kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. And they began to celebrate. So once again, this is the heart of God. Is that he knows your sin. We know the penalty of sin is death. We know all these things, right? But we have to understand that this is the heart of God who also does right by his own law. Because guess what? His law is love. He's going to love us. He said he desires compassion, not sacrifice. He's going to have compassion on us. He is everything that he says he wants us to be. And in being that, in you transgressing the law of God doesn't mean that he's going to fall into transgressing the law of God. His heart's going to change. No, his heart's still the same. Now, do we have consequences for our actions? We do have consequences for our actions, but I believe that in the story with Absalom, he experienced his consequences without David doing anything. He got his head stuck on a tree. None of David's men did anything to him for him even to be stuck like that. He naturally got his consequences from God in that situation. In the same way, in this parable, The son already naturally got his consequences. He was eating with pigs. He had nothing. I think that's enough punishment for the situation, for turning your back on your father. And so I hope this was a good lesson to you guys. Definitely love you guys. God's heart versus law. I think this is very great to understand, because when you're just straight law and you don't understand his heart, you're not understanding the judge of the law, you become very cold-hearted, very evil, very hateful, very condemning, very persecuting, very bloodthirsty, very bloodthirsty. You become very bloodthirsty. But we have to understand what it means to chase the heart of God, which is not lawless. It's not lawless. It's not lawless. But he does have a heart concerning his law. And so, tithe and offering, MFH pools $200 a week to ensure that God's word can and will continue through the ministry. We will then redistribute all collective funds evenly back out to those that gave. We'll be the first to bless you. So what happens is you guys send money into the Cash App. We pull about $200 now. That may be going up sooner than later because of all the things that we're doing now in the ministry, and getting around and to fellowship with a lot of people in a lot of different places and apps and all types of stuff that we're doing now. So that may be going up in a little bit, but the concept remains the same. And we have a couple more full-time ministers working with us. So what happens is you guys will send in your tithe and offering. We'll pull out an amount right now that'll be $200. We'll pull the $200 amount, and we will use that to make sure that we are able to pay for our apps and everything we need to do in the ministry. And then we will distribute the money back out to you, to those that gave. Whatever's left will be equally redistributed. Okay. And so we'd love for you to be a part of that program. That's Money Sign Christ King Way. This was God's Heart versus Law, lesson 27. I hope it blessed you, and we'll be back for lesson 28 very soon. Have a blessed day.